Welcome to the Privacy Filter, Barnes & Thornburg's briefing on privacy law and policy. Subscribe for the latest updates.
Nobody decided that AI governance should be a privacy job. It just kind of went there. Privacy teams already knew how to inventory data, evaluate a vendor, get 5 departments in a room. So when AI showed up and the work went to those people, they already had the experience and the muscles for it. What didn't follow was headcount, training, budget in a lot of cases, or any real grounding in how these systems actually work. And the ground keeps moving underneath us. The companies building this tech are in a race. And as we often see, racing means fewer guardrails. Every guardrail a vendor leaves out becomes a risk that turns up inside your company instead. Meanwhile, the rules meant to sort all of this out and keep getting written, narrowed, and rewritten over and over again. So you're being asked to govern something that you didn't build under rules that are still moving really quickly and not settled with the team that you already had that was really put together for something else. Today, we're going to get pretty practical about how we can actually address these challenges that are facing a lot of privacy professionals in the space right now. What's a privacy professional actually needing to do to understand how these systems work? What technical details change your legal analysis, and which ones just kind of sound like they do? How do we think about AI agents? What to do if you're starting from nothing within your department? Our guest today, I'm extremely pleased to welcome Ojas Rege, Senior Vice President of Emerging Products and Technologies at OneTrust, where he works on the responsible use of data and AI. Ojas is an engineer by training with a Bachelor of Sciences and a Master's in Computer Engineering from MIT and an MBA from Stanford. He spent 30 years building enterprise security, privacy, and data products, including as Chief Strategy Officer at MobileIron and earlier roles at Yahoo, Sybase, and Oracle. He's a fellow of the Ponemon Institute, holds a CIPPE and a CIPM from the IAPP, and spends his days with privacy teams working through exactly this problem. My colleague Owen Agho is also with us today, who you'll recognize from previous episodes, and Owen's going to take the lead in leading us through this interesting conversation today. But my name's Brian McGinnis, and welcome to the Privacy Filter podcast. Owen, over to you.
All right. As Brian mentioned, hi, my name's Owen Agho. I'm also data privacy and AI associate here at the firm. And I'll just thank you so much for being on the pod today. I guess my first question is, can you kind of tell us a little bit more about your history and how you've seen the technology stack kind of evolve over time?
Yeah, happy to. And Brian and Owen, thanks so much for having me on. What a great topic. Hopefully, we can give people a couple of starting points and, as you said, some practical guidance. OneTrust is a integrated governance and risk management platform. So we started in the privacy world. You know, people know us very much for privacy, consent, and so forth. And as we've been talking about with AI is a natural extension of that, right? In terms of thinking about what is the risk. So think about us as the trust layer that exists in the organization that's focused on ensuring that there's an understanding of how data is being used, there's an appropriate assessment of the risks, and an appropriate mitigation and enforcement of controls to make sure that the data is not misused. We're a global organization with over 14,000 customers across the world. Every X number of years, there's some dramatic shift in the art of the possible with technology. And, you know, we saw that with the web, we saw that with cloud, we saw that with mobile, and many, many other things, where suddenly there's this burst of energy that, oh, we can do things that we haven't been able to do before. And, you know, we're seeing that right now. To your point, how's the technology stack evolved? But there's a fundamental difference with what we're seeing with AI from a tech stack perspective than what we saw prior. Because all those transitions I described, you know, PC, web, mobile, cloud, all of them were primarily about access. It's how do I give access to compute to people in a more effective way? And of course, how do I, you know, rev up that compute so they can do a lot of stuff, right, on their phone instead of, you know, on a big mainframe. With AI, we've actually had smart systems, right? Thinking systems. And so it's the first time that the actual set of things, the set of problems we can solve has grown not just because the computers got faster, but because the computers can do things they can't do before. So to your point on technology stack, that has implications, right, for the whole stack, and of course for all the professionals that are involved in every aspect of that stack.
Now, kind of following up on that evolution, you mentioned a quote that a privacy officer said to you, and let me make sure I get it right. Our company has a leadership mandate for every part of the business to adopt AI. Our privacy team now must evaluate AI risk, but we aren't getting more staff and we just can't keep up. So, can you talk more about what exactly privacy teams are being asked to do and how you see them contending with these new responsibilities?
Yeah, I think this tension of volume is is at the core of so many of the issues we see. And Brian, you brought this up earlier as well, right? Which is that privacy teams have an important role to play in AI. And, arguably AI is not new to the privacy function. We've always had automated decision making, and every privacy law has had ADMT, requirements or guidance, if you will. What's happened in many, situations is that the privacy team, which has spent a lot of time thinking about how data is used, right, which is really key for AI, not just data being lost, but how you use the data, the misuse of data, and why that's important to manage and mitigate and so forth. They're being brought into the AI circle. Um, but the challenge is, of course, that AI is shifting the goalposts on every single technology system in the house, if you will. And so I kind of my framework in my head is I think about privacy, data governance, and AI as a Venn diagram, and that intersection is increasingly substantial. Those are all data problems, right? Privacy is a data problem. AI actually is a data problem. They're all kind of related to each other. And the interesting thing I think about AI is AI amplifies any gaps you had in your privacy and AI program, privacy or data governance program, right? AI will amplify any gap you have. So now the privacy team has to also not just look at new projects, but they've also got to reevaluate the analyses that they've done and figure out if the risk landscape has shifted, right? And how models, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, but how models are going to deal with this incredibly sensitive information, which is personal data.
Now, given all these responsibilities, what are you seeing privacy teams struggle with the most, given these new responsibilities and new tasks?
The big struggle is prioritization and literacy, actually. I should say that, right? Prioritization to handle the volume of requests they're getting, and then the AI literacy to be able to feel confident in evaluating these systems in a way that's credible. Privacy professionals have not really had to talk to data scientists in the past, but now that's a pretty important part of the job. And for both these, prioritization and literacy, there's absolutely practical starting points, next steps that, organizations can take. But it takes a little bit of, taking a deep breath, saying, okay, I'm entering a whole new world. How do I now get ready for that so that I can contribute real at the speed at which my organization is demanding I contribute?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest impacts that I see in my practice and work with companies is just the speed at which AI is really accelerating everything. I think
Yeah.
we're ultimately getting to points that we probably would have gotten to eventually, but you add AI into the mix and all of a sudden it's like, every week we're, just exponentially growing. So when you've got a privacy team who, in my experience, largely is still trying to get their arms around how to manage this in a ever-changing landscape of privacy laws, I don't think anybody really feels like they've got this thing done and dusted and behind them 100%. They're still working on that piece. Now you've got AI that gets added into the mix that adds new laws, new regulations, new technologies, and requires new skill sets, and does so at a pace that we haven't really seen before. Lots of problems there, right? So, like, what are you seeing internally, or any tips that you have for our privacy teams who are trying to build out their governance programs on the AI side? What is successful to try and keep up with that pace?
Well, I think you, as a privacy professional, got to rethink your prioritization model. So one of the challenges many privacy professionals have always had is really making the rest of the business as focused on the need to respect privacy as perhaps they are. There isn't always the engagement that in the rest of the business because, what do the folks at C-level care about? They don't really care how many assessments you did, right? They don't really care how many data subject access requests you supported. What they're caring about is like what's impacting the business, right? And so I think that a good way to think about this reprioritization, this new lens for the privacy team, is to step back and say, what are the data initiatives I have in my company that have the biggest impact on the business model of the company? And either good or bad, meaning that initiative goes well, company does really well, initiative goes wrong, wow, like everyone at the C-level is going to care. And then and all those initiatives inevitably have AI in them at this point in time. And then of those initiatives, these core data initiatives tied to the business model of the company, which are the ones that rely on personal information? Because not all of them will. There might be something I'm doing on the manufacturing side. Great. Well, that will be really important to someone in the organization, but maybe not the privacy team. But that little intersection, the 2 by 2, if you will, which is it's a data initiative that has a huge impact on the business model for good or bad, and it's reliant on personal information. Whatever's in that top quadrant, that's the priority. And that might mean that 80% of the work out there right now on the privacy team's plate maybe shouldn't do that, right? And the 80% of the time needs to be focused on those because my biggest concern personally is that and it's human nature, when someone is overwhelmed by volume, they try to do a little bit of a lot of things and none of them work out that well. And this is a chance for every team to kind of step back and say, what are the programs, initiatives that really matter to the business? Let me focus my, privacy, professional risk governance energy on those. Make sure we get those right. And then I'll have to figure out what to do with the rest. Who knows? But I can't do the rest and get these wrong. This is where I've got to focus. So it's a new model of prioritization that's much more focused on the impact of the data initiative on the business model than it is on specific compliance needs.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great framework though, because you get a lot of, privacy pros that are coming in-house or working for a new company and they want to build this great, beautiful, perfectly compliant program, whether that's AI governance or privacy governance. You don't always get to pick and choose what the priorities of the business are or, what the business is going to support, right? So thinking at it and ensuring as these in-house practitioners that you're really keeping a focus on what moves the business forward, what drives revenue for the company, those kinds of things, and then filling in around those in top priority, I think is really a great strategy and absolutely key.
And very practically, that's how you get budget. And you get budget
That's how you
if
get
you're
budget.
working on the initiatives that matter most. There's an interesting anecdote I can share from one of our customers where they've kind of shifted the mindset. And I do think in this AI world, the mindset of the privacy pro needs to shift, right? And the way we think about the function, where they've shifted their mindset to say we're like HR. You know how HR has a business partner relationship with the business. Every one of the HR folks staff, they're partnered with some part of the organization, and they try to understand what the priorities are of that organization. So they've started to look at their privacy team, and privacy teams are small. But they've said, okay, you're looking at this business, you're looking at that business, and once every quarter, once every 2 quarters, you're going to get together with someone in the leadership of the business, and you ask them a very simple question: what are your data ambitions for the next 12 months? What are the data projects that matter? Just listen, absorb those, and then come back like the prioritization said, focus on those, right? Like that's how that you're going to drive value to the business. And in this day and age, many of those initiatives are absolutely going to be touching personal information. So that Venn diagram intersection is very substantial.
Yeah, that's a great mindset shift as well. I mean, to your point, we also look at all these problems as data problems at the end of the day, and really what we try and do is unlock those problems for business. How do we get value out of the data? How do we ensure that we can use data in a way that's not going to get us in regulatory or legal trouble? How do we sort of unlock the promise of all these AI tools using that data and having a clear sense of where the business is going, what ideas they have from a data perspective, but also trying to help them see kind of what's coming next, both that maybe they haven't already realized they're going to get to with the business problem, but certainly also with the legal and regulatory complications. That's really, I think, become our jobs in a lot of ways.
Agreed. Lots to do.
Yeah.
Not much time to do it.
No, or enough people, or enough budget,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera.
So, kind of sticking on the trend of keeping this practical, I'm going to ask this question for all the um, humanities majors, poli sci, who somehow found themselves in privacy and AI. Uh, if a privacy professional had to know like the top three or whatever number technical concepts to keep in mind as they're making their way through this world, what do you think those should be?
There's something really interesting I wanted to share with the audience, and these are two quotes from very different timelines that I think reflect what we see in AI. So the first quote is, "My dear, here we must run as fast as we can just to stay in place. And if you wish to go anywhere, you must run twice as fast as that." Now, that's the Red Queen from Alice in Wonderland, 1865, which I think like never has anyone had something that reflected the pace of AI and the challenge of AI as much as that. And then the second quote, a little bit more recent, 2018, is, "The pace of change has never been this fast, yet it will never be this slow again." And that was Justin Trudeau of Canada at the World Economic Forum in 2018, which also I think accurately reflects what we should be prepared for, which is we think it's fast right now. It's going to get even faster. There's so much changing and it feels very technical and overwhelming for folks. The nice thing about AI is that it is actually powering individuals without technical leanings, giving them the power to develop. So if I think about the three technical concepts that might be most important, the first one is the citizen developer tool sets. So these are the tools that anyone in the business can use and is using now, the Copilots and the Gleans and the so forth, to build stuff that they never could have built before. Like anyone can do that, right? It doesn't matter what major you were. So just understanding that layer and understanding what that layer enables people to build and actually trying it and building, number one, understand that because that gives them a sense of what the individuals in the company are going to be building that frankly they're going to have to assess for risk. So that's number one. Number two is got to have some baseline understanding of what an agent is, right? There's a lot of noise around this. Oh my gosh, what's an agent? Does it do this? Does it do that? Is that thing I saw in Terminator? No. Yes, that was an agent. But I think that's key. And we can dig a little bit more into that, which is understanding at the top level how agents work, what they do with data specifically, right? And what your expectation should be, right, with those agents from a risk perspective. You don't have to understand the depths of the models underneath, but you got to understand, how agents work. And then the third thing I think that's really important is not a concept that's specific to AI, but something that we've always dealt with in an organization, which is access and authorization, which is how do people get access to certain systems and what are the permissions that they need to have in order to approach those systems. And the reason that that becomes important, of course, is linked a little bit to agents, which the agents can only do what the system lets them do. And so, as we talk about what a privacy professional needs to do, all three of these, the citizen developer tooling layer that all their employees are going to be using, the basics of agents, and then how agents get access to data are important for them to understand.
On the point of agents, I mean, hopefully people have a general understanding of what agents are, sort of what they're doing now, what they can do. You're starting, not only, are people playing around with agents, OpenClaw, things like that at home. Increasingly, you're starting to see that roll out more into enterprise software. But I think we're still very much in the early stages of what that looks like. From your chair, though, and your perspective at OneTrust and in your own career, I'm interested to see or hear from you what you see coming in the next, let's say, 2, 3, 4 years with agents rolling out, in particular, into the business community. How is that going to impact companies and operations in ways that maybe people who aren't as dug in on AI right now don't yet understand?
I don't even think we're gonna have to wait 2, 3, 4 years.
Yeah, for sure we won't.
Changes in 12 months are gonna be astronomical. There's a couple of things that I always keep in mind when we think about agents and AI, which is one is the hockey stick of intelligence doesn't have a blade on the end. It doesn't even out. It's going to keep going up exponentially for a very substantial period of time. So we're going to have highly intelligent systems. That's number one. So anything that we think, well, AI can't do that, to prepare for the future, we should probably put that to the side. It's like, no, AI will have the opportunity to do that. The second thing is you not only have the intelligence, but you have the ubiquity. So every single line of code, every data set, every business process in the company is going to be touched by AI. So we shouldn't, as a privacy pro, for example, be thinking about AI as this discrete thing sitting here with a set of 5 projects that are AI centric or AI native. Every single third-party vendor you use is going to have AI embedded, every single business process. So that's also an expectation you should have: intelligence, ubiquity, and then the final one is autonomy, which is agents will have the ability to have exceptional amounts of autonomy. And the implication for a privacy professional is it's going to be really core, and the AI governance professionals, to understand how to put guardrails around that autonomy so that there's kind of appropriate protections. We should be thinking about it, and I don't mean this in a philosophical way or a science fiction way. We should be thinking about agents as people, right? Meaning they're very similar to a new employee that you bring into the company. They're going to be able to do the kinds of things that employee will be able to do, and you have to put the guardrails around them similar to what you do when you have an employee.
Yeah, there's a certain level of assumption that comes out when you're dealing with a human being that I don't think people have entirely gotten their head around with these sort of autonomous agents, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
easy to point at somebody and say, okay, well, you made this, you did this. Obviously, if something goes wrong, it's on you. When you have an agent now operating presumably on someone's behalf or taking an action on their behalf, I guess there's a lot of work that I see within our clients that still needs to be done in getting the concepts around responsibility, ownership, ramifications of use of these tools that I think we're still very early days on.
Well, I think you're putting your finger on what I think is maybe the single most important gotcha that every company is going to face, which is accountability. Who is accountable for the actions of the agent?
Exactly.
Because
Yeah.
it's going to be easy to kind of point to someone else. And agents may not be acting on the behalf of a single individual. So this to me is key. And again, from a privacy pro perspective, if someone comes to you in the business and says, "Hey, I want to deploy this agentic system," maybe it's a go-to-market or personalization system that's going to use personal data. Question number one to them is, okay, who is accountable for the decisions and actions that these agents take? Because if there is no one in the organization that's accountable for those, then you got like a problem before you even think about the technology. And things are moving so fast right now that accountability is very diffuse. Big issue.
One thing I kind of want to follow up on is you mentioned at the beginning that people have this refrain, well, AI can't do that. What are some common misconceptions you see people repeating over and over that we should take this time to dispel now so they know why they're listening to this podcast?
I have kind of like when I talk to our customers about this, and we talked about what AI can do. Like, I ask them a question and say, so what does it mean to be smart? Right? Like, there's a philosophical question: is AI going to be smarter than us and all that? But I said, well, what does that mean in an enterprise context? In an enterprise context, probably what it means is, if you think about someone in your organization, you're like, wow, that person is really smart. Probably means they have domain knowledge, right? They know a lot about the domain. Retention, they probably got a good memory. They're remembering everything. They're good at pattern matching. They're good at problem solving. They're super focused. Well, I can pretty much guarantee that even right now, AI is better at all those things than I am personally. Now, there's the other philosophical question about creativity. What can they do and so forth. And I was like, that's a great cocktail conversation question. But for the reality of what happens in an enterprise today, all those things I just mentioned, domain knowledge, retention, pattern matching, problem solving, focus, all these things, AI can do really, really well. And we're barely halfway through 2026, let alone, what's going to happen over the next 12 months. So my guidance to everyone when they're asking the question, what is the limit of what AI can do? It's like, don't approach it that way. Like, just like you don't say, well, what is the limit of what a human being can do? Like, assume AI is going to have a broad set of capabilities. So you better start right now figuring out what the road looks like that you're going to build for AI to operate on in your company.
So we're talking about all this exciting new technology, what it can do. Let's transition to talk a little bit about the regulatory landscape. So something Brian and I see every day, our clients come to us saying, "Hey, we want to do this cool new thing, but we're guessing there may or may not be something out there that stops us from doing it in a certain way." How are you seeing the clients you work with try to contend with the current regulatory landscape?
There's a kind of a simplistic thing that a lot of times people will say, which is 100% true. Regulation can't keep up with the technology, right? It hasn't been able to in the past, and certainly can in AI. And we have a different there's a different factor at work with AI regulation than any other regulation I've ever seen, right? Including every privacy legislation. Broad concern about inhibiting innovation. Very broad, fundamental concern. I think about this a little bit like it's the AI arms race, right? Like arms race is when you've got an asset that's really important that's going to give you power and so you hoard it, right? And we are in an AI arms race right now, not just at an enterprise level, but at a national level. Every country is worried about falling behind in AI. Every country is worried about falling behind in innovation and so forth. The challenge of that is that meaning privacy professionals, can't do what we did in privacy, which is look to the GDPR, look to CCPA and other regulations for maybe not, perfect guidance on what to do, but relatively, kind of effective guidance and help me build my programs. We're not going to have that in AI. It's going to be all over the map, and there's going to be ups and downs on whether there's regulation or not. So the key thing is anyone who is waiting for specificity from the regs to decide what to do is not going to have a successful experience. And so if an organization is coming to, the privacy pro and say, "Hey, should I do this or not?" Can't rely on regs. Like leave the regs to the side for a sec. The key is back to kind of the principles of the organization, right? What is the harm that could be caused? What is the risk we're willing to take on, right? Given that, and then what are the mitigating factors we have to put in place? So it's going to put a lot of pressure, yet more work on the privacy pro and the AI governance professionals to be able to, in the absence of clear guidance from any regulatory body or even any framework out there for that matter, think about for the company they are and the business that they're in and the customers that they have and the reputation that they have, what are the principles that they need to follow, and then build their policies, around that. I don't think there's any other way to do that. We have to be regulation agnostic in many ways and principle centric at a company level to be able to, build the right capabilities in place. Not that the regulations don't matter. We have to make sure that, as the regulations evolve, that those can be iterated appropriately within the organization. But it's a different model, I think, than what we saw in privacy.
Yeah, you're exactly right, though. I mean, principles, another way to say it, that we talk about a lot about is trends. You have to be able to sort of look ahead to, what do we already know? There's an
Yeah.
uncertain current present for us, but look at those principles that are baked into the current laws and regs. Look at the trends of where those are heading. And that's where most of the business
Absolutely.
gets done, I think, for our
Yeah.
clients is out in front of those regulations.
Yeah, and I think that this is 100% agree, right? Because I mean, even think about privacy regulations. Like, even if your state or country doesn't have privacy regulation or it's in process, you kind of know what's going to be in there. Like kids
Yeah,
are going to be
that's right.
important. People are going to be worried about kids. People are going to be particularly worried about biometrics. They're going to be worried about risks. So I feel like on the privacy world, when new regs hit, rarely are we surprised, right?
Shouldn't be.
Yeah, they really shouldn't be. If to your point, if someone's surprised at a new reg and what it includes, and they probably haven't really been paying attention to the old ones. And AI, in some ways, is similar, which is, the core of all of these regs, every privacy reg, what's the core of it? Why does it exist? It's to prevent harm, right? There's no other reason that it's there. And so I think that, at the core of it, any AI reg or any kind of AI action that's taken, it's going to be around harm. But I did have something else I wanted to add on this front, if that's okay. Um, I think that many companies are looking at this potential loosening of regs in the wrong way. So they're looking at the loosening and saying, well, countries are getting maybe a little bit hesitant to enforce and regulate. So that means we can do more. It's like, no, totally misinterpreting what's happening here. Those regs are being loosened for the technology providers. So where's the burden of risk shift? It's on the shoulder of the enterprise. So the risk that the enterprise has to take on just ratcheted up astronomically. It's like my analogy of this is car seats. You buy a car seat and it's got a little certification on it. So you feel like, even if I don't get in 100%, like it's probably good enough, right? Ain't no certification. So you can no longer be, as the regulations loosen, all that means for the CEO of an enterprise that is using AI, not building AI, but using AI, that they can't rely on their vendors having put in place guardrails or had the systems in place to certify that tooling is going to do the things that they want to do. And if something goes wrong, or I should say when something goes wrong, because inevitably it will go wrong, who's at fault, right? Where does the burden, the liability live? It lives with the deployer. It doesn't live with the technology provider
or the individual. And
or
that's
the
you can take whatever position you want on and be as aggressive as you want, but I can promise you the plane of spar will be watching. And we're already finding all sorts of
Absolutely.
unique ways that they are taking, a lot of times privacy adjacent, maybe even technology AI adjacent laws, and finding ways to shoehorn new claims off of those laws.
Well,
Yeah,
AI is
almost
going to create
certainly.
all kinds of opportunity to do that. Like, I think that's the policy shift that should be keeping the C-level awake at night, which is, oh
Yeah,
my gosh, our risk just doubled, tripled
absolutely.
more than what we thought it was.
Yeah, and if you're doing that in a way of like tiptoeing right up to the edge of every single regulation you can, where you can, that's just not the approach. And part of back to the notion of being surprised by new regulations, you shouldn't be. But also, when those business teams come to you and say, "Hey, you have that conversation about what are we doing with the data in the next 6 to 12 months,"
Yeah.
you need to be able to tell them ahead of time, like, okay, here's where we think this is going. Here's some things that maybe you're not quite to yet as a business team, but we expect that you'll get into this next. And if you're asking this question or collecting this data, sooner or later, somebody will figure out you can also do these things with it, right?
Yeah.
So looking ahead for them that way too and staying on top of it's really critical. But keeping the individual, things like notice, transparency, clarity about use, what's going on with people, that's never kind of going to go out of style, right? And is always going to be one of these principles we looked at.
And I think that there's also an important, I mean, everyone needs a little bit of a simple framework to figure out like what to do. Like we talked about prioritization, and there is a fundamental difference between um, AI systems. The way I think about it, AI systems being applied to personal data versus personal data being applied to AI systems, and the difference is AI is code, so I can use that AI system for personalization anything I want, right? As long as I'm doing with it the thing that I got consent to do, I don't need to get consent because it's AI. Just like you didn't give me consent to only use Java code on my data versus Python code. But the bright line, of course, is when that personal data is being applied to AI, meaning when that personal data is training AI. Because now I got lots of issues with all the traditional, things we expect in companies that respect privacy, which is like the right to be forgotten and purpose limitation. That becomes an issue if you're training your models using personal data.
Now, one thing we always try to do in this podcast is to keep things practical for our listeners. So, given that we've talked a little bit about the landscape here, I guess the ultimate question is, okay, I've watched this podcast. What do I do on Monday morning to try to be better at my job than I was before I listened to this podcast? Like, if you started from zero, what are some like the first steps you can take to kind of get yourself ready for
Yeah.
the new
The
normal?
best way I think about this is to align it to what privacy pros already are really good at doing. So if we leave aside all the buzz and noise of AI, I've got data that comes into a system, into a processing activity, and I've got an outcome that I'm trying to establish. In the middle there, I've now got this thing called AI and these models and these agents and all that. But fundamentally, this is about understanding the data that comes in, understanding what I'm going to do with that data, and understanding the risk of that and ensuring that fits with whatever I do, right? Like, and again, as we mentioned, ADMT is automated decision making has been in privacy for a long time. So I think first thing is to go back to the things I know well, which is privacy, and leave aside the complexity of AI and just think to myself, these systems, they operate exactly as they did before. They've got a new tech in there, but I still got to understand inputs, still got to understand outputs. Okay, so that's great. Second thing that I've got to do, I would say, like, Monday morning. So that's probably just so that I take a deep breath and say, okay, this is okay. I can handle this. The second thing is I really do need to have some way to prioritize the massive set of projects that are going to come my way, and have a very business focused way to prioritize, so that I can go to my manager, and I can go to the C level, and I can go to other the business leaders, and kind of they know what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And then the third thing, which is, I think, a really interesting thing that we haven't chatted about yet, is to be able to understand some of what I would call the unexpected privacy outcomes or implications of AI. And on that third one, I'll give an example of this that to me is really eye-opening. Pretty much any company with a B2C experience, it's got chatbots, right? And a lot of those chatbots are increasingly have AI on the back, and then they kind of escalate to a human if necessary. But there's a lot of AI chatbots, and those chatbots, to your question earlier, are going to get better and better and better. At some point, the person won't need to be there until like the very, very end, possibly. However, people share different information with AI chatbots than they do with humans. People love talking to AI, and AI is gives a lot of positive reinforcement. So there's a gentleman I know who was head of the R&D kind of labs team at a major bank, and so they did a little test to see if it's a bank chatbot. So it's like, you want to open up a new account, whatever, right? And if the consumer thinks there's a human on the other side versus AI, do they share things differently? And the answer is, they do. So if a human on the other side, the consumer is very matter of fact. I need a bank account, and no more, no fees, whatever. If it's AI on the other side, they start chatting. Like, I need a new bank account, going through a divorce, whatever. All this data that you never expected, right? So you've got unexpected data and lots of toxic combinations that you never expected. So, long-winded answer to number 3 point I was making there, Owen, to your question, is the other thing you should do on Monday is sit back as a privacy professional and say, hey, what are all the digital touch points I have in my organization where the consumer, my customer, is now going to be interacting with AI? And I need to spend some time over the next few weeks putting together inventory of those and kind of reevaluating them, because I may have to make some decisions like, hey, we transcribe everything that comes through the chatbot. Don't save it all, because you've just saved all kinds of personal information you didn't know about that then who knows who's going to use, right? So we should expect that human behavior changes as a result of AI. And as a privacy professional, you're in the best position to understand where the points in the organization are that people will share personal information, and then kind of put the flag up a little bit saying, let's go inspect that a little bit further and see what we need to do potentially, right?
And when we started this conversation, I asked, like, if you're starting from ground zero, what should you do?
A drink.
Always. But on the other end, for those who are
Yeah.
doing it right, the more mature programs, what do they have most in common that you're seeing?
They have buy-off at the leadership level in the business. That's really key, which is that leadership has realized that governing AI is not a compliance checklist, and that the downside is not just I get fined. Governing AI is an executive necessity, and the downside is my business fails. And we're going to see, I think, more and more people go down that direction, because over the next 12 months, every day, we're now starting to see AI exploits we didn't expect. But to me, that's the link, which is the business realizing that AI governance and the implications for privacy are fundamental to the delivering value.
Yeah, what have you seen be successful? Because we've been talking about getting buy-in for privacy programs for a long
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
How much difference that makes for a company doing it, good versus excellent, or otherwise. Now you've got AI in, and there is such a urgency, such a rush. We got to do this, or we're going to get left behind. We need to implement this new tool, etc. that you, let's say, could forgive some business leaders for losing sight of the privacy program and the importance. So, what
Mhm.
have you seen successful out of privacy professionals who kind of are the ones that have to show up and say, hold on, guys, slow down a little bit. We need to get the governance right. We need to understand the PI that's being processed as part of this in a way that slows down the people who are trying to run the quickest with AI.
Yeah. I think it's a mindset shift on the privacy side to be able to tie it to business metrics that matter. And you know, it's kind of human nature, which is sometimes, and it's unfortunate, but sometimes we don't change our mind on these things until something bad happens. Like what I tell our customers is like what you're trying to do, what you want to do for your business is you want your business to be able to ride the AI rocket ship without blowing up. How do you get that message across? I think point number one on that message is that the Privacy Pro has to be tightly aligned with those major data initiatives that have an impact on the business model of the company, because those are the initiatives that the C-level is going to care about, right? And like we talked about with prioritization, being able to codify the harm that could be created if AI did not handle personal information correctly for those leading initiatives. That is, I think, the responsibility of the privacy team to be able to do, and then have the level of collaboration with the business to be able to say, hey, I'm in early with you. I'm going to make sure this stuff doesn't happen.
Before I ask this next question, just a quick note to Brian. If you see me taking notes after this next question, I'm not looking for a new job. Just trying to make sure that everybody gets what they need out of this podcast.
I'm very interested in
Um,
knowing what this question is
so
now.
here's my
I
question.
am too. Nice build up.
Looking forward, what would privacy professionals need to understand a year from now that they don't yet understand? And what types of skill sets and mindsets will they need to adopt over the upcoming year to be prepared for them?
I go back to something we talked about near the beginning of this show, which is literacy. AI literacy. You just got to use this stuff. And I'm not seeing anyone really push back. Like privacy professionals are just as excited as everyone else to be able to use AI. Dive in, like use the tools, like just learn, gain comfort and confidence with the kind of core capabilities, right? And leave aside any preconceptions you had around what software can and can't do, and because code becomes this abstract concept in the back, yeah, right? It just kind of gets created based on your needs as an individual. And I think about the world we're in, to your question around like aside from literacy, are there like skills, things that I need to have? Like, who do I hire? How do I decide who to hire? So we're in a world now with AI where, you know, volatility is going to rise, continue to rise, transparency is going to continue to drop, and agents are going to proliferate. Like, there's no reality in which those three things are not happening. And I think that the core skill to be able to deal with that is not a technical skill or a legal skill. It's what I think of as tolerance for ambiguity. You gotta become comfortable in chaos and be able to accept uncertainty or unclear situations, because the days of pure explainability, even, which is so important for privacy, go away when systems are nonlinear and non-deterministic, right? And if that creates anxiety for an individual, we got to get over that anxiety. And so I think the notion of these things are linked, because if you become more literate in AI, you gain more confidence with what technology can do. You also start understanding where the uncertainties are. And one could argue whether this is a fully accurate statement, but in a lot of ways, what do we do as privacy professionals? We're identifying where the uncertainties might be and how information is used that's going to create potential harm, right, to an individual. And it's no different for AI.
So, in terms of kind of bringing this podcast to a close, let's say people have been listening to us on 2x speed and now they're coming to the
Let's
end.
say, I mean,
It's the only way to
let's
listen to podcasts, in
yeah,
my
yeah.
opinion.
That's a no judgment statement, just throwing it out there.
Uh,
For those who've been listening to us in 2x speed, what are just like three top takeaways that you would hope a person would walk away from listening to this conversation?
number one takeaway I would hope people walk away with is we have to rethink our assumptions of what technology can and can't do. Whatever constraints you thought were on technology before, assume those are gone. That is the best way to prepare for the future. Number two is can't do it without using it, right? Got to get your hands dirty. And this is one of the challenges many companies have because sometimes the C-level does not have the familiarity with these things, and these things are so essential to the business. So, regardless of background, years of experience, whatever else it is, we got to roll up your sleeves and dive in. And I think the third takeaway would be that the key value metric for privacy is not related to the traditional compliance risk management that privacy professionals have been, deep in for so long. It's about how I manage operational and strategic risk and what are the metrics attached to that. So it's kind of a reinvention of the value, a rethink, if you will, an evolution of the value of the privacy function. And if I can add my thought on that, um, I think that the value the governance professional brings to this new world of technology is to protect the ROI of AI. That to me is fundamental because Brian, you mentioned everyone's got the pressure to move fast, right? So everyone's deploying things right, left, and center. If something goes wrong, what's your recourse? You got to roll the whole thing back. That means, you got to market with whatever AI system you had. You didn't get any ROI on that system. You had to roll back in 6 months because you did something horribly wrong. So to keep AI systems in market, to keep models being effectively trained, to get the competitive advantage and the top line value you want, you've got to have the privacy and governance model in place so you don't have to roll those systems back. It's about protecting the ROI of AI.
It's the way you do it. I think a great closing message here. Yeah, this isn't going anywhere, guys. And privacy pros are just amongst basically any kind of professional, any kind of industry that are going to have to adapt to the changes that AI is bringing and at a pace that we really haven't seen before. But just great point, and I love the line earlier about riding the rocket ship of AI. It is our job to unlock that for the business and allow that to become possible and to do it before they blow up, like you mentioned. Great analogy for us as we think about how to approach this and move our organizations forward. Maybe it wasn't something you signed up for, or even expected when you started your, privacy job, but it makes all the sense in the world for privacy professionals to be the ones that really help organizations get their head around what they need to do to unlock the potential of this for their company and for their business. So exciting time for us, I think, to be in this industry, to be playing this role, something I know all three of us really immensely enjoy. So thank you both for the incredible conversation. It was really interesting and a fun one too. Owen, thanks for leading us through and helping piece this together. Ojas, of course, thank you, sir. We've got Ojas Rege, Senior Vice President of Emerging Products and Technologies at OneTrust. Thank you again, sir, for your time. Really excellent. You can find us all, I'm sure, including Ojas on LinkedIn. But appreciate you joining us. Thanks, guys. We'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.